So, and then now Loki. Ooh, I love the Loki show, but I will say that plot makes not one lick of sense if you really break it down. Beautifully shot, cinematography, the color palette, color grading, the aesthetic, set designs, everything is just fantastic in that show. And I love just the story in general. I really enjoyed. It was intriguing. It was fantastical. You know, getting to see Loki and Sylvie's interaction and their characterizations, their interpretations of the character. And of course, was it Owen Wilson or Luke Wilson? I always get them mixed up. I think Owen, as was it Mobius? He was great. And I knew when he was pruned that there was no way he was dead, because there's no way they're not going to give us a wow at some point with this actor. I mean, that's like a crime if he doesn't get to do a wow at some point. But as much as I loved it, the plot really doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because the TVA is protecting the sacred timeline, the sacred timeline being the main MCU timeline, and it's isolated from the multiverse. So when someone does something that they're not supposed to do, it starts a branch off. And the TVA shows up in that branch, arrests the person who created it, and erases the branch to keep everything secure. What doesn't make any sense to me is, unless they're taking that person and putting them back where they're supposed to be in the sacred timeline, I don't understand why they pull them out completely. Because Loki is arrested basically in the Avengers of the first timeline movie. So since they pulled him out of the sacred timeline, he doesn't exist there anymore. So every single thing he did in all the subsequent films can't happen. There's no possible way for it to happen now, because they pulled him out of the timeline. Like Steve Rogers at least went back in time and returned all the stones to where they belonged, so that everything that had happened from the moment those stones were taken, they gets to still happen, because the stones were put back at the right place in time. So everything else still gets to take place. But with Loki being snatched out, nothing that follows of his character can happen. He can't end up getting his mother killed. He can't end up imitating his father. He can't end up on the planet where Thor is in Ragnarok film. He can't end up getting his neck snapped by Thanos. None of those things are possible to even happen anymore. If they still have the video footage of all those events happening, they haven't actually pulled Loki from the sacred timeline. They've invented another multiverse. And this is now a parallel Loki, in a sense. The only way all of this still works is if, by the end of this TV series, they take Loki and bring him right back to that moment where he disappeared with Tesseract in Endgame, and put him back in his timeline. Otherwise, nothing he does is possible after that moment. So it really doesn't make any sense. And where did Sylvie come from? If this is the sacred timeline and our Loki is Loki, Sylvie can only exist out there in the multiverse. So why would the TVA care what's going on in the rest of the multiverse when their job is to watch the sacred timeline? She can't exist in the sacred timeline. Where did she come from? So it doesn't really make a lick of actual logistical sense at all. At all. So I still love it. I've watched it multiple times, and I'll watch it many more times. But I just have to ignore that the plot really doesn't work. It just doesn't make any sense. But still a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to seeing more of Sylvie. The actress did a fantastic job in that role, and the character was really well written. And she's just as interesting and intriguing as Tom, Hiddleston's Loki as well. They're very different from each other, but alike where they need to be. But that was just a really well-crafted show that kept you on your toes and kept you interested, as long as you ignore that the plot's impossible.